Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order our regular meeting of October 7th, 2015. Roll call, Kim, all members present. Thank you. Our next item would be the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please join me? If I can get up, will you all join me? Okey-doke, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. All right. Our next item would be the items for approval by consensus. Oh, and here it is. Okay, we have the approval of minutes September 23rd, 2015, regular session. Approval of out-of-state field trip Lake George, New York, May 26, 2016, and warrants CF05. So that would be letters A, B, and F. I believe everybody can vote on those. So I'd entertain a motion. Mr. Bjork?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Mrs. Bonish? All those in favor? Unanimous, Kim? Payroll warrants 9/30/2015. I'd entertain a motion. Mrs. Broussard?
Make a motion to approve payroll warrant of September 30th, 2015.
And a second, Mr. Mullis. All those in favor? That would be 5 in favor and 2 abstain, Mrs. Carroll and Mrs. Kane. Warrant CB01. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Mrs. Carroll.
So moved.
And second, okay, Mrs. Broussard, thank you. All those in favor? All right, 6 in favor, 1 abstain, Mrs. Burns, Kim. And warrants SPED 01, SPED 02, SPED 03. Oh, yes, Mr. Buell.
Sure, so moved.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Mullis. And all those in favor? Okay, 6 in favor and 1 abstain. Thank you, Kim. Mrs. Burns. Okay, thank you. Done.
Did you, oh, we did that.
Yeah, we did the other one in with the first. Okay, dope. Our next item of business would be our student representative, Dina. We're so happy to see you again.
Yes, I love to come back here, and I love to keep this tradition that I've started with you guys. So, first of all, hello everyone. As you all know, I'm still Dina Singh, and I'm still the student representative. I have not changed, and I'm pretty sure you guys haven't changed. So that's good. And last time I reported to you guys about the benefits and the facilities that the school has to offer. Today I want to report to you about the upcoming events in the school that are coming up in October and how the entire school has contributed in preparing for them. First up, tomorrow is the ice cream social on the 8th, and many clubs are preparing by making their intricate posters, and every single club preparation, it has been done by the students with the aid of teachers. I would say it's mostly the students, which is nice to see that the students are contributing to the clubs and showcasing that they are very passionate about the clubs that they're representing. And I feel like the student body and the teachers as well created an awesome display of the WHS pride that will reflect onto the ice cream social. The clubs that I'll be representing is the Environmental Club and the World Cultures Club. The Environmental Club's primary mission is to promote and enforce recycling. It seems very simple, like recycling, reuse, reduce, recycle, stuff like that, but it's much more complex than it seems. WHS is already environmentally improved through the new school and everything, but I mean, we don't settle for average. We go beyond that. We go for above average and step forward. Having our mission is to have recycling bins placed where necessary. Where they aren't, we could put them in to make it even better. And educating the entire community on which specific items are considered recyclable and which aren't. Because some people they get confused which ones they can recycle or not, and that's not a crime. I mean, people aren't perfect. That's okay, which is why this club is here to inform you about that. Just to give you a little tidbit about it, stuff that can be considered recyclable are like plastic cups, paper products, glass products, and cardboard. So, you know, that water bottle, your Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, that can go in recyclable. You don't have to throw that in your trash can after you're done with it. And this club is very well worth joining. We have a very low supply of members because people aren't interested in environmental club and everything because they're like, it's an environmental club, it couldn't be fun. It is fun in many ways, and when you realize that you're making a difference by just becoming a member in this club, then you notice why it's worthwhile to join. And the other club that I represent is the World Cultures Club, which was formerly known as the Foreign Language Club. We changed the name because people are like, oh, we already know foreign language. We're taking either Spanish, French, or Italian. And we're like, we don't teach foreign languages. We're much more about that. We want to acknowledge the fact that this club is about teaching other members different cultures that they won't be able to learn about maybe in their future, and maybe they won't experience with other people, depending on where their careers are and what they want to do in the future. And, you know, walking out of a World Cultures Club meeting, knowing how to hold chopsticks or how to write your name in Hindi can really make the whole community full of open-minded people, which is a very big step by one club meeting. Next week, I want to point out is the PSATs. That's fun. Come on, I'm not being sarcastic. That is pretty fun because it's for my future, so I care about that. This year, the juniors have to take it, obviously, and the sophomores have the opportunity of taking it. And the PSAT this year is free, which is, I think, a really great way the school district has used their funds to make the PSAT free, because it's like, it's not at any certain point in your time, you're going to have to take it. So if you can take it for free, that's a win-win for everyone. So, and that's what my opinion about that was. And then Spirit Week is also approaching us, where all of us are anxious and excited to see the amazing turnout that will happen. Because I really loved Spirit Week last year because it showed how much pride and honor a student has being a Wilmington High School student, and how no one is like, even if you wear blue and white, you show pride through it. Even through the, like, you know, a little bit face paint or your makeup that will have blue and white in it. That's just, I like that because people are involved in the school just by wearing blue and white, our colors. And then lastly, on October 29th is the Mr. and Miss WHS contest. And many people have already started preparing for it because I stayed after for extra help with my teacher, Ms. Casson, who is sort of the head of the Mr. and Miss WHS, and she had a small meeting with the people who are going to be running for it. And it's October 7th, and the contest is on October 29th. So I like that they're already engaging in it, and they're not waiting until, oh, I gotta choose a song for my entry on October 28th. You know, that's a good thing, and I'm excited for it because it's an amazing way for seniors to be involved in their last year, and a way to, like, you know, push forward and end their senior year with a bang. And I love how this isn't a popularity contest because the student body doesn't vote for it. There's designated judges who judge the contestants and vote for them. It is also sometimes influenced by the audience cheering and everything, but in a way, it's better to have judges and people, like the teachers and staff that don't always talk to you or aren't in your daily life, like, you know, when you go home on sports and everything. So that doesn't influence anyone's winnings, which is very fair, and it's like kind of like the justice system, like in our U.S. court system. And pretty short because I saw that it was pretty long last time with my speech. You know, you can say it. I know I'm talkative, but this time I kept it short. I'm pretty much done. And ending my report, I would like to start a tradition with my my reports that I give you, is that I end it with a very inspirational quote that reflects onto WHS. And this is from Malala. especially her movie came out. He named me Malala on October 2nd. So I feel like this is very appropriate to use for WHS. It is one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. This reflects WHS because one little detail can change the WHS for the better and the positivity that can carry us out in our future for a very long time. Thank you.
Dina, thank you so much. Anyone have- Yes, Ms. Burns?
I have to say, I know it was said at the last meeting, but your enthusiasm, I can't help but smile when, I do enjoy you speaking. I had a couple of questions for you. Does your environmental club, I believe there was a green committee in town at one point. I don't know if they're still active, and I didn't know if that was something worth exploring, to kind of join forces and share ideas.
That actually sounds interesting because I wasn't aware of the Green Committee. I would bring that forth with my teacher advisor that is in charge, which is Ms. Pietro, and I would bring that up, like, that would be good to join forces with.
It may give you some ideas as to
Yeah.
how you can put forth your goals within the high school.
Yeah.
And drive that, because I think it's a fabulous idea for you to do that. I know Superintendent Delay, that's what's the word I'm looking for? Passion, thank you, of hers as well. And I just have to ask,
Yes.
Spirit Week, what are the days? Have they figured that,
I
which days? are-
haven't, I thought it was going to be in September, but now it's October. So I heard that it's going to be during the week of Halloween, that last week in October. I heard it's going to be during that week.
So you know how that each day has a specific theme?
Yeah.
I just didn't
Oh,
know if,
I don't know if they picked the themes yet. I'm not really aware of that.
okay.
I could look into that.
Maybe too
Yeah.
early, I just thought I'd
Yeah,
ask.
I know it's like, WHS Pride Day, there's always Costume Day. And I think there was Twins Day last year. But I don't know if they're introducing something new.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, I was just curious.
no,
I enjoy seeing the pictures pop up on Facebook.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
you too, thank you.
Thank you, this is delightful again. Thank you so much, Dina.
Thank
We
you for that
appreciate
comment.
it. Okay. Our next item of business will be the superintendent's report.
Yes, I have the unenviable task of, succeeding Tina's report. Thank you so much, Tina. I too enjoy the report, and I hope the World Cultures Club is going to do the same event that they did last year with the food. I'm a big food person, so you have
the
the
Culture
Cultures
Fest?
Day. Yes.
The Culture Fest is every other year, so it's not this year.
Oh, no.
It's next year. It will
Okay.
be next year. Come on,
All
it's
right.
coming up though. It's next year. So,
That was a fantastic
yeah.
event. So just a few updates. Friday, October 9th is the full day, in-service day this year. And there's no school on that day. Obviously, there's a variety of professional development activities occurring. The most significant of which is a full-day training for all of our elementary teachers on the Envisions math program. So that's a big PD activity. In addition, there are activities occurring both at the secondary level as well, focused on anything from, curriculum, alignment activities to, I know that our behavioral health task force will be meeting to engage in certain activities. Actually, a lot of schools are undertaking an effort this year called relationship mapping, which is pretty exciting, where we're actually going to have a process in place where teachers can identify students that they have a connection with. This is a really important behavioral health strategy where we are able to identify students who perhaps are not as connected to adults in the school community as we'd like them to be, and allow us to be able to put some supports in place to ensure that they have those adult connections. Adult connections and relationships are pretty vital to the success of students and struggling learners. So we'll be doing that at several schools as well. In addition, the District Advisory Committee has been formed, and we're so grateful for all the responses that we had. We had a really great response. I know that Mrs. Broussard will be the representative from the school committee. We have about 16 members representing all the schools, parents, not all the schools, but different levels of the schools, parents, different organizations in town, like the Chamber and the School Business Partnership. And our first meeting is going to be on October 27th at 7:00 p.m. An additional activity that I'm engaging in this year is to conduct some superintendent forums. These are sort of town hall style meetings where we're going to discuss topics that are of particular concern or interest to school staff and invite them to come and engage in dialogue about challenges around a particular topic. The first one is actually going to be on October 29th, and the focus of that forum is going to be on assessment, and both at the district level and at state level. It's going to be differentiated into 2 sessions. The first one will be for secondary level staff and the second one for elementary staff. Again, the focus here is just to dialogue about challenges and to brainstorm possible solutions. We're not going to solve problems, but it's an opportunity to give voice to the concerns that staff have around particular issues. The other thing I wanted to just bring to your attention are 2 pieces of legislation that I was just recently made aware of, and I've given copies, I put copies at each one of your places for this evening. The first one is House Bill 1831, an act supporting municipal fiscal stability through a special education stabilization fund. This has been submitted before in prior years. We're told that perhaps this year, this piece of legislation will have gained some support. And essentially what this allows, with the adoption by the school committee and by the town meeting, it would allow us to establish a special education stabilization fund where we could deposit funds that were surplus from our special education budget in a given year and allow us to essentially cushion unanticipated or unbudgeted costs in future years. And as you can see from the legislation, there are restrictions and controls, such as the fund balance can't exceed 2% of the annual net school spending of the school, and gives the district, the school, the treasurer, the municipal treasurer, the ability to invest the earnings. So, from our perspective, this is legislation that we would like to support. It gives us another means of being able to deal with surpluses and deficits in special education. Those are unpredictable expenses, and this is just another tool for us in our tool belt to be able to deal with those fluctuations that happen. So this is something that I'll be reaching out to Representative Maselli and Representative Gordon, where it's in the House right now. The other piece of legislation is Senate Bill 2020, and this bill was submitted actually by Jennifer Flanagan, and it's an act relative to substance abuse prevention. This bill would essentially, there's a number of provisions. It's really designed to be kind of a holistic approach to substance abuse prevention, but there are several sections in the legislation that relate to school districts around the, what's called the SBIRT screening. That is a screening tool that actually we here in Wilmington do actually use. We're one of a handful of districts who have implemented SBIRT over the last couple of years. And it's a screening tool that's administered or performed by the school nurse as well as guidance staff. Right now, we just screen 10th graders. This legislation would require screening of 7th graders and 10th graders. It is a confidential process, and it's essentially a dialogue between students and the school nurse or school guidance counselor, which allows those individuals to identify if a particular student might be at risk, and then there's a process in place for being able to refer depending upon the level of risk assessed for that student. So it's something that we already do, but that being said, it's not something that we necessarily feel should be required. This has the look of an unfunded mandate, so it's something that we have some concerns about, and I think our correspondence with the legislative delegation will be around ensuring that our questions are appropriately answered and making sure that if it is a mandate, that it has appropriate funding to go along with it. The only other thing I wanted to just say was that on Monday, October 5th, we celebrated, or as a school community, Blue Shirt Day, which is a World Day of Bullying Prevention. And was very pleased to see the level of support, the sea of blue, as I call it. For us here in Wilmington, it was fairly easy because blue is one of our school colors, but there was a sea of blue in our schools to support that, and I also thank those of you who lend support to that day today, and I noticed many of you have blue on as well to acknowledge this very important day. October, as you know, is Bullying Prevention Month nationally, so lots of activities happening throughout our schools. And that's my report.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Our next item of business is a very pleasant one on one hand, and a kind of a sad one on another hand, I would say. And the superintendent, on our behalf, is going to recognize Mr. Brian, police officer, I'm not sure his name. Detective Brian Gillis.
Yes, and we should acknowledge that Detective Gillis is here with his family and his wife and his 2 children, as well as Chief Pagonis, and Lieutenant Sensabaugh as well is here. And we're happy to have you here to basically offer this certificate of commendation on behalf of the Wilmington School Committee. I had the opportunity to work with you just for a year, and I know that you've been providing some incredible support to the schools over the last several years. And while we certainly will miss you in this role, you remain incredibly connected to our school. Obviously, with your children in the schools, we're going to see a lot of you. But certainly from my experience with you, I just so appreciate the way that you have dealt with the student body, the relationships you formed with both staff and students. Students really, really respect you, and you are a great role model for them, and you've just done some incredible work here for Wilmington High School as well as the school district. So we thank you so much for your service, and we congratulate you on your promotion and wish you the best of luck, but we know you're not going to be a stranger to us. So on behalf of the school committee and Mrs. Kane, we'd just like to offer to you this certificate of commendation.
Say on behalf of the school committee, one of the things that has always been so good about you is the staff says so many nice things about you, as do the parents and people in town. And when we first started tonight, we were talking about how important it is to have that one-on-one touch. That's what I was thinking, that of all the nights for us to have this and be talking about that, because really that one-on-one is, I think, a lot of what makes a huge difference in some of these children's lives.
I agree. Thank
And
you.
you've been so good at that job, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I know. Do you want one, Kathleen? We're going to take, all right, Kathleen wants to take this. Gonna take one too.
it wasn't very good.
And Chief Pagonis, it was so good of you to take time out of your busy schedule to come for
Very much
this.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Really, and Lieutenant Sensabaugh, you very much.
Brian, obviously, it was a hard decision to ask him to leave this and go to do something else, but he's one of our go-to folks. Yeah, I guess the blessing of this is he certainly left the school resource officer position in a better stead than when he took it over, and I'm hopeful, I'm sure he'll do the same thing in his new position as the
Absolutely.
prosecutor for the Wilmington Police Department. So can't ask for anybody better. And you folks have been wonderful to him as well. So,
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, girls, for coming to our meeting. Someday maybe you can be the student representative right over there. We'll be glad to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good luck. Okay, that's so nice. Our next item of business, superintendent goals, 2015-2016.
Yes. Seems like I was just here a year ago. Time flies.
It does.
And I actually had the opportunity today to be Skyped in to the new superintendent's induction program to offer my thoughts about the value of the program as a new superintendent, now being in my second year. And as I was preparing my remarks, I think one of the things that really struck me is how much more grounded it feels this year. And obviously, part of that is the relationships that have been developed, relationships with school committee, relationships with town officials, town staff, police department, all the departments in town, as well as the relationships with our leadership team and all of the school staff. That certainly laid the groundwork, but the process that we went through, the entry plan process and the development of the strategic plan document that you adopted at our last meeting, really, I think, helps us to very easily align our work and make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction. And so at some level, this year was easier to develop goals because we'd gone through that process, and I think we all feel very focused on the work that really needs to happen. So as you'll see from the presentation, these goals are very much aligned to the work of the strategic plan work that's happened over the last year. So with that said, just going to go through the goals here. The first goal, as you know, with the evaluation process, each educator and administrator is tasked with developing a professional practice goal, which is really designed, as it says, to develop the professional practice of the educator or the administrator. We're also tasked with the development of a student learning goal, so you'll see that as well, and some, in my case, district improvement goals, in the case of a school-based administrator, school improvement goals. So we've been engaged in that process. Administrators have all submitted to me their goals. They were submitted on October 1st, and that's a really important process because that will also lead into the development of school improvement plans over the next few weeks, which will be presented to you on November 18th, the school improvement plans. So the first goal here, my professional practice goal, is around achieving strategic focus, alignment, and coherence. And this is in some ways a continuation of last year's goal. While it doesn't necessarily focus exclusively on the new superintendent's induction program, I am in the second year, and continue to thank you for your support, financial and emotional, for my participation in that program, because it really has been crucial to keeping the focus on strategic planning and strategic alignment. So that's a piece of this, but also, just as the goal is stated, is to continue to use this strategy for improvement of student outcomes to develop a shared vision, to maintain that strategic focus on the implementation of the plan, and to align the district and school improvement goals with this particular plan. Also to align our budget, which we're actually starting our budget development process in earnest, having distributed the budget forms and guidance to school principals and department heads this past week. So aligning those resources to those goals in a much more thoughtful and strategic manner, and ensuring that we're continuously monitoring, reflecting, and adjusting our priorities and goals based on the results that we're seeing. So that's the focus of this goal right here. One thing that we've added this year to our planning process is outcomes. We feel it's important to really set forth for the community what is it that we hope to achieve at the end of the day, at the end of the year, when we've gone through the different action steps that we've outlined here. Student learning goal around closing the gap. This is, again, a continuation of last year's goal. You will receive in a few minutes a presentation from Dr. Burnham around our performance from 2014-15. And there certainly are a lot of positive things to report, a lot of growth happening, but still some struggles with respect to the gap between our high-need students and our non-high-need students, particularly our students with disabilities. So this is important to keep on the forefront of our planning. So this goal is basically being defined as closing the gap in using the measurement, the gap in ELA, math, and science, technology, and engineering between our our struggling learners, our high needs learners, our non-high needs learners. And what we're seeking to do here is to get our percentage of proficiency from our current percentage of proficient advanced to the state average. And so you can see the figures there. And in so doing, hopefully closing the gap. We have 4 district improvement goals. The first is, once again, sort of a continuation of last year's goal, and this is around developing and expanding leadership capacity. We've done some great work this past year. I think our administrators over the course of last year became very familiar with the use of PLC protocols and strategies to develop, to implement a more collaborative model, and the use of time and how they use time has been much more around facilitating collaboration between within staff. And at the end of the year, it concluded with a really fantastic training, a 3-day training where we had 30 district administrators and staff side by side learning about PLC strategies and protocols. And we are seeing that happen. I received emails during the course of September from administrators who are beginning to use these protocols and strategies, and just how impactful they felt that this was on the work that they're doing, and that they're really able to use these strategies to make sure that all voices are heard and that the focus of their work is really on that collaboration. So we'll continue to do that work in that area.
Could we say what PLC stands for?
Yes, professional learning communities. Sorry,
Yeah.
we tend to be a little bit,
I know there's a few of them in this. They
acronym
should
and
come up.
jargony.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just tell the people,
Yeah.
because they'll know.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another goal, safe and supportive schools. Last year, we had a goal that was around behavioral health, so this is definitely part of this goal is around continuing the support of the Behavioral Health Task Force, but we've expanded it. We have a newly formed inclusion task force that met for the first time last month and was able to engage in an exercise around creating a vision and doing some backwards planning. And they will continue those efforts. They have monthly meetings scheduled throughout the course of the entire year, facilitated by an outside consultant, and everybody's very engaged and passionate about that work. We're going to be looking at social emotional learning curriculums and try to make sure that we have strong SEL programs, pre-K through 12. We don't necessarily have that currently. We're looking at MTSS, and actually the bulk of the time on Fridays, in-service day for the Behavioral Health Task Force, it will be focused on MTSS. We're going to look at the DESE resources. We actually have a school coming out to present on their implementation of MTSS from another district. And so we're excited to begin that work. And continuing the work with the Behavioral Health Task Force around measuring and monitoring and deciding what do we want to look at to evaluate the success of our behavioral health initiatives. As you know, we applied for the grant from Leahy Clinic that if we're successful in receiving, we should hopefully hear by the end of next week that if we're successful, we would be able to have trainers, in-district trainers certified to do the mental health first aid training, which is an important component of this. So lots of really great stuff happening in the area of safe and supportive schools. District Improvement Goal 3 around enhancing communication and collaboration. Certainly took to heart in the result of the school committee's evaluation of me, and your comments were very positive, very supportive, but I took from the information that you provided me that one area for improvement was to enhance communication, collaboration outside of the district, but with families, with community organizations, with community members. And so this goal is really about doing that. We formed a district advisory council, as I mentioned earlier. The first meeting will be on October 27th. This year I have a superintendent's blog, and I've been posting to that on Fridays on a weekly basis to get information into the hands of our parents and families around the good work happening in the district. We continue to do our monthly newsletter, and we're looking to do some parent education nights on a variety of topics. We've reached out to the Middlesex Partnership for Youth that provides that, but also in the mental health grant that we submitted, there's funding that we've asked for that would help us do even more of that. And we're working to outreach to the business community to enhance the relationships, create more opportunities for hands-on learning. Ironically, the PSATs provided us this opportunity in that we needed to actually find a place for seniors to be because the school doing PSATs was a little too full. And we've had a number of businesses in town step up to the plate and offer to do job shadowing on that day for our seniors, which is great. So I understand there's something, for example, Analog, I think, has 40 some odd students coming to do job shadowing, for example. So, those are the types of relationships we want to continue to develop. And finally, also stronger opportunities, stronger relationships with area colleges and universities. We have a relationship right now with Middlesex Community College. It's not utilized as much as it could be, so we want to definitely continue to promote that. In addition, we have some colleges that have approached us about early college opportunities so that they would actually provide college-level classes here at Wilmington High School, where students could leave Wilmington High School if they completed those courses with some college credits under their belt. So we'll continue to explore that as well.
Before you move on, I love this, and I'm hoping that this happens. The fourth outcome down, at least 3 parent workshops with attendance of at least 50 at each workshop. We would be so excited if we saw that. Yeah, that's an ambitious goal, and we hope that you make that goal.
Yes, and we certainly have some ideas for that. I think that first and foremost, it's around kind of creating that sense of urgency and importance. On October 21st, you will be presented with the results of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. I think that there will be some results that will be somewhat perhaps alarming to people. And for example, my intent is to have the superintendent's blog that Friday before that meeting preview some of the results and invite people to come to that presentation. And we're already working with Middlesex Partnership for Youth to offer a parent workshop as a follow-up to that around how to spot the signs and symptoms potentially of substance abuse and how to deal with those issues, for example, when they come about. So I think that's the way you get attendance at those workshops. That, and from what we're understanding, providing opportunities for children to come and be able to engage in activities. So, combine that with a movie night where we have a couple movie opportunities in different parts of the building for kids to be able to be occupied. Families tend to need that support of childcare.
Sounds great.
So. And finally, the fourth district improvement goal around achieving operational effectiveness. This is a kind of multi-layer goal. A lot of it is around evaluating how we currently use resources and ensuring that we're using them in the most effective and efficient way possible, but also aligning our resources to our goals and making sure that we're very transparent about that people know that if we're asking for this amount of funding each year, that we're helping them understand how those dollars are being invested and what outcomes we anticipate, so that it helps us to be able to advocate for the resource we're looking for, and just continuing to improve on our transparency and the comprehensiveness of our budget requests. And lastly, to create documented procedures manuals for our key operational areas. This is a real area of stewardship. Should any of our key folks no longer be here, we want to make sure that there's continuity of operations, that things are well documented. So that's a big focus of the work for our departments as well.
That's great. Any questions or comments? Mrs.
I
Broussard?
was just going to make us all aware and put that bug in our ear. We've had some discussion through the evaluation process about the timing of our annual compensation discussion versus the evaluation itself. So I think we don't want that to get away from us too far. And I think that we were of the belief that need to get the evaluation done prior to any discussion of compensation. So just wanted to put that bug in people's ear, and we should probably make a decision how we're going to handle that for this year.
Yeah, so what I would anticipate doing is that I would present the report that I presented to you in September of this year. I would do that presentation in June, in advance of discussions around compensation. Then that way you could do your evaluations. I would present you with the information prior to that, but then you could do your superintendent's evaluation public session. You could do that in June prior to discussions around and negotiations around contract.
I also think now that we've done it once, I think it will be I think we were all nervous about it. And we found out it did not take as long as we thought, and, I think that it'll be easier. Instead of keeping a month or 6 weeks to do it, we
Yeah,
could probably do it
absolutely.
in a couple of weeks, too, yeah. Great, thank you, Mrs. Burns.
With regards to the goal, closing the gap goal, one of it is that research and take recommendations on a data analysis tool. Are you currently exploring tools, or how is that going to roll out? Who's kind of
Yes.
researching, and what kind of tools are you?
Yes, so that is something that started this past year. Our data and assessment specialist, Jen White, Dr. Burnham, myself, we actually had some demonstrations provided for us by several vendors.
Okay.
And the goal here is basically to have a tool that would allow us to capture, we have so much data, but it's in so many different places. We have data in Aspen, we have data at DESE, we have data in our special education tool that we use, software tool that we use. There's so many sources, but yet, to actually aggregate them into one place so that they can quickly be evaluated and filtered and used to capture, okay, here are the students that are most at risk based on the criteria that we decide. So we've started that process, we want to continue that process. Neil Ellis is involved now as well, since it is software, and our hope is that we're going to continue to evaluate, and that our budget will have a amount of money that we think it would require to be able to pay for a subscription to a online tool that we'd be able to make readily available to staff.
So there's a vendor that you're
There's several that we
inter-
looked at, and
Okay.
and then it's a
You're
process of
exploring.
sort of deciding, yes, this one provides the best option for the amount that we feel is reasonable.
Okay.
There's the Cadillac and there's the Ford, and we want to,
which will meet
we
our
want the
needs.
smart car.
Right. And, thank you. And I had just another question, and maybe it's more just clarification regarding the Goal 2 and Safe Supportive Schools with evaluate and develop a plan for implementation of a true multi-tiered system of support. Is that not what the DCAP is supposed to be, or is that, what is I may be off on two different paths, I just.
The
need to
district
clarify.
curriculum accommodation plan certainly is there to basically lay out a process, the IST process,
Right.
which is, there to support students. But the MTSS or the multi-tiered systems of support is about how we address academic and non-academic supports. The
Okay, so it goes
DCAP tends
beyond
to
that.
be more academic,
Okay.
but it focuses much more. I mean, it's not just sort of tier 1 and tier 2, it's about how we provide not just the strong core academic and non-academic, whether it be the design of the curriculum or the behavioral supports we provide, but also what are we providing at tier 2? What are we providing, so that's supplemental, what are
this
we
would be
providing as
broader.
intensive? This is much more broad.
Okay,
It's
great.
really a systematic and systemic approach
Okay.
to essentially how we provide supports to students all students, 80, 90% of student needs are addressed at that tier 1. We've got another, say, 5 to 10% that need that extra layer of tier 2 supports, and that 1 to 5% that need that intensive support. So how do we provide that, both academic and non-academic? Some need just academic, some non-academic, some need both. Some are interrelated, some are non-related, so it's a much more comprehensive approach.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Any other? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the superintendent's goals for the 2015-2016 school year. Mrs. Bonish?
So moved.
One second, Mr. Bjork. All those in favor? Unanimous, Kim? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I think 5 things are out of. All right, our next item of business is the revolving account.
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Ruggiero to present his report on the FY15 revolving accounts.
Thank you. In front of you, you have the final FY15 revolving account report. As you can see, all revolving accounts finished the year with positive balances. All the expenses and revenues collected during FY15 will be reflected in the district's end-of-the-year report, which I am working on as we currently speak. Included in there will also be any funds allocated from the town, as well as our spending against our local appropriation. I should have a report on that, the next school committee meeting, a final local appropriation financial report. And we were in the black, so.
Does anyone have any questions on the report? One of the things, in the past, we have had the CARES program present to us what was happening, and really, it's a nice opportunity for Jeannie to explain what's going on in that program and how it's a very successful program. And so I don't see that it would happen soon, but later in the year perhaps,
Sure.
we could have her come in.
Absolutely.
That would be great. Do we have any other? This is when I know that I'm a humanities person, not a mathematician person. I know you love doing this, but I think it looks like so much work, and you do such a nice job, Mr. Ruggiero.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And we know that that's what you gave up, sort of.
I don't necessarily miss it.
We've turned it to this side. All right, so we don't need to have a motion on that, but thank you, that's great. All right, our next item of business is the performance assessment update. I think Dr. Burnham is,
Yes. Turn this over to Kate.
could I ask while she's getting ready, because you might have this answer. How is this is such an unbelievable report. How is it generated? Do we put that together, or do they send us this information?
So, do you want me to take that one while you're getting the presentation? Sure. So a lot of the graphics that you see are
Yes,
actually
yeah.
generated through DESE.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's very helpful. We still have to capture them and put them into a report, so I don't want to minimize the effort that Kate went through to pull this together, but they have quite an array through the Edwin Analytics tool that we have available, quite an array of different reports available to us to be able to have these snapshots of graphical displays, which I think are much easier to read than tables and tables of
Oh,
data.
absolutely.
So,
Great, and they're color coded too. Thank you.
I did, just to give the committee an update while Kate's pulling that up, I would get to see this, the
Is this her
family.
family?
Mhm.
Yes, I see
You
other
must be
things on my
such-
screen, I don't know why you're seeing that on yours.
Oh, you must be such a proud mother. Look at, you're the tiniest one there, it's hard to believe.
Yeah,
I understand that feeling.
So, this past Friday, I did, actually maybe Saturday, I did, the blog post was on our MCAS performance, and I need to push that out to you all. You can see it via our website. If you go to the news section, it automatically posts, when I post the blog, it automatically posts to our Twitter feed, our Facebook page, and our district news site, but I can push that out to you as well. And in that report, just sort of summarized the high-level results of our MCAS performance from last year. Talked a little bit about the upcoming impending MCAS versus Park decision that's scheduled to be made on November 17th. Oh, here we go. So I can push that out to
Great, thank you. Excellent. We like success.
So this year, we're taking a little bit different approach. Normally at this time, we bring you just a report of our MCAS results. But as you know, there are so many other assessments that we're doing in the district that we thought we'd give you a little peek at some of the other data that we look at a regular basis. So we'll start with the MCAS. And as we revisit the kind of data that we get from MCAS, there are two different types. There's the performance information, and you're familiar with students scoring proficient, advanced, et cetera. That's the performance piece. But we also get growth information, and that's that student growth percentile information. So when we take a look at the overall performance and where we sort of fall in performance spans, if you will. Above 75% proficient or higher, proficient and advanced. ELA, grades 4 through 8 and 10 fell in that category. Mathematics, grade 10, and our science, technology, engineering, also grade 10. In that bracket between 50 and 74% proficient or higher, we've got ELA, grade 3, math, grade 3 through 8, and science, technology, engineering, oops, that should be out of there, grade 10's up there. Proficient or higher, below 50%, we have our STE, grade 5 and 8. Last year, we were happy and celebrated that grade 5 was no longer below the 50%, but unfortunately this year, we're back to grade 5 and 8. When we take a look at the number of students scoring in the warning or failing category, failing being just for grade 10, warning for all other grades, you can see the numbers that fall out in the different tests that are administered here. Good news is that by the time our students reach the 10th grade, where they must pass the test in order to obtain a competency determination and earn their high school diploma, we have very few who aren't passing as 10th graders. Oftentimes, those students will meet that requirement either by taking a retest in their junior or senior year, or they will demonstrate proficiency in another way by successfully passing courses in the content area, let's say math, for instance, in both their junior and their senior year. When we take a look side by side, comparison between our two schools, the Shawshene and Woburn Street, for grade 3, you can see that the results are fairly comparable with the exception of percentage of students that fall into the warning category. Same is true for math. Fairly comparable. You can see that Woburn Street is performing a little bit better in terms of the numbers of proficient and advanced students, and much better in that they have a lower percentage of students falling into that warning category. Grade 4, the North and the West, again, comparable. We can see that the West has a higher percentage of students falling in the warning category in ELA and the warning category in math as well. Looking at grade 5, and you'll see science is on this slide because this is the first year that the students take the science MCAS exam. Again, comparable scores for the most part. Again, we see that the West, grade 5, has a higher percentage of students falling into that warning category. So that's certainly something that we will be looking to resolve and see those percentages decrease for next year. We also have students who participate in the ALT assessment. And this past year, we had 30 students participate in ELA, 31 in math, and 9 in science. And where those students fell out in a performance bracket here, you can see a description of each of the performance categories and the number of students that fell into that performance category for each of the content area tests. When we talk about growth data, that's that SGP, student growth percentile. When we talk about that, we're talking about students in a grouping of their academic peers. And their academic peers are those students who have had the same exact performance trajectory. All of those students in that group essentially had the same exact score on last year's math MCAS and the year before's MCAS. So anyone who's been on that same trajectory becomes an academic peer group. You can see that there are brackets here where below 40% growth is low growth, and anything above 60% would be considered high. So anything between the 40 and 60 is moderate. You've seen this graphic before. Where we really want to see everybody is up in that blue quadrant. That's where we want to see everybody, high growth and high achievement. We really don't want to see anybody down in the low brackets. So how did we do when we look at the data by grade? ELA, you can see that our 8th grade is over in this orange or golden quadrant. 3, 5, 6, 7, and 10 are in the yellow zone. So we're smacking that moderate zone and we're above the red line. So that's good. We've got the high growth. And we've got 4th grade actually in the blue zone. So we're happy about that. For math, we can see again 6 through 8 and 10 fall into that yellow bracket smack in the middle. But our grades 4 and 5 actually end up in the blue quadrant. So that's where we want to see everybody head into the blue. When we look by school, all of our schools fall into the yellow bracket there for ELA, and North and West actually fall into the blue for math, and the middle school and high school are in that yellow quadrant for math. When we look at our student groups, in this past year, we spent a lot of time and effort digging into the data deeply with our students with disabilities subgroup, trying to understand misconceptions that we could address within the context of our instruction and curriculum. So when we take a look here, our students with disabilities fall into actually this should be flipped. The students with disabilities fall into the green zone, where our students without fall into the yellow. So that's concerning because they're below that 50 percentile. So we want to see them get above that red line. Summary by subgroup. So our non-disabled students are outperforming our students with disabilities, still in many cases by double. Our non-disabled students, are showing moderate growth and higher achievement, but our students with disabilities are falling into that low growth and lower achievement for both ELA and math. Subgroups. Students with disabilities, you can see a combined percentage proficient advanced at 35%, with 25% falling into the warning category, whereas our students without disabilities are in the 88% proficient and advanced, with 0 falling into warning or failing. And that's in ELA. And in math, you see similar numbers with our students with disabilities at a combined proficient advanced percentage of 21 and 42% falling into the warning failing category. Students without disabilities, 79% proficient and advanced, with only 3% in the warning or failing. When we take a look at science and we look at the reports that we can generate by standard to understand how students are performing against the standards, we can see that our students are struggling with topics related to energy, within the life and physical sciences domains. Grade 8 did show improvement, however, this year compared to last on that same topic, even though they still are struggling a bit. We can also see that soil, rocks, and properties, Earth's history, are all problematic in the earth sciences domain, so we need to do some work there. And this year, we saw a change with our introductory physics for grades 9 and 10, where all standards showed some degree of struggle for our students. Continuing to look at the results by standards for math, our students with disabilities performed above the state, grade 4, but struggled with geometric measurement in grade 3, properties of multiplication in grade 3, patterns and relationships in grade 5, representing and interpreting data for grades 5, statistics and probability for all grades 6 through 8, expressions and equations for grades 6 through 8, and number systems as well for 6 through 8. Taking a look at our ELA by standard. Students with disabilities performed at or above the state in all grades except grade 8. And our reading anchor standard, particularly the integration of knowledge and ideas, is a standard that's problematic for us right now. And we continue to struggle a little bit with results in terms of open response. Now here we get into the new material that we don't usually present. Access for Ls, that you might remember the presentation that Sue McDonald gave a couple of weeks ago. This is the assessment that is given to all of our ELL, our English language learner students. This is the way the data comes to us, and Sue takes a look at this data, and you can see that students are placed in one of those 6 different proficiency levels. She takes a look at all of this data for each of the students to see how they're doing. And then she took a look and compared performance with our writing scores between 2014 results and the 2015 results. And you can see that students are demonstrating some growth, which is great news. And you can see that there are varying degrees of student growth percentiles on this as well. So the higher we go, the better we are. MKEA, that's our Massachusetts Kindergarten Entry Assessment. We administer that assessment as part of our full-day kindergarten grant. This past year, the cohorts that are involved with that grant were required to collect data in 2 domains, cognition and the social-emotional domains. And the good news is that our students are performing on grade level in both of these domains. Then we have our own internally developed elementary math benchmarks. These are given at the beginning and end of year to set to measure the growth of our students over the course of the year. And we're all eager to know if our Envisions pilot classes had any different result as compared to the non-pilot classes. And you can see here, we had some pretty good growth for all of our pilot classes for grades 1 through 5. And it actually shows better growth as compared to the non-pilot classes. So we're hoping to see good growth for all of our students this year because all of our students will be participating in the Envisions math program. So when we take a look side by side, Lisa Ippolito was fantastic to kind of do all this analysis and put the charts together side by side so that we can see how our pilot classrooms fared against the non-pilot classrooms. It was, like I said, pretty encouraging data. And we're excited to see what happens at the end of this year. We also use AimsWeb as a benchmark for literacy in our elementary grades up through grade 3, kindergarten through grade 3. And we've been talking a lot about tiered instruction. And this particular assessment is a nationally normed assessment, and based on grade level national norms, you can see the green here indicates tier 1. That's where we would want to see big numbers there, everybody in tier 1. Tier 2, those are the students who need a little bit of added support and assistance. Oftentimes, you'll see that intervention provided through small group. Those students that fall into the red category, and you can see that there are a few, those students require more intensive, oftentimes one-on-one types of support, or even smaller group instruction. Those students might be working in groups of 2 or 3, or individually for additional intervention. So you can see grade 1, fairly comparable data. You can see our winter versus spring assessments. Those are the 2 triangles side by side, winter and spring. So we've got the district as a whole, and then we've broken down the data by schools. So you can see the Woburn Street side by side with the Shawsheen. And you can tell by just looking at the colors that the Shawsheen is, we have a few more struggling readers over at the Shawsheen. And it's just a side note that the Shawsheen is our Title I school last year. This year, both the Woburn Street and the Shawsheen will be receiving targeted assistance through the Title I grant. When we take a look at grade 2, again, at the district level, you can see that there are 3 different benchmark assessments during the year. We do a fall, winter, and spring for grade 2. And again, we've broken out the Woburn Street and the Shawsheen side by side. Again, percentages that fall into that tier 2 are a little bit higher for our Shawsheen school. And then we have grade 3. Again, the district view for the 3 benchmarks over the course of the year, Woburn Street and Shawsheen. You can see the percentages actually are a little bit more comparable by grade 3 between the 2 schools. Then we have our Fontes and Pinnell data, and I debated a little bit about how to share information around this particular assessment, and decided to go with just data for students receiving reading services. And this is the rationale for that. All of our classroom teachers up through grade 5 are administering the benchmark assessment, but the North and the West only just started to administer this benchmark assessment last year. So we need a little bit more time for teachers to learn how to grow in confidence in their administration of this assessment and do some work on calibration so that any teacher assessing any student would come up with the same scoring. And until we get to that point, sharing that data, it might be a little bit misleading because it's not quite to the place that we would want to see in terms of having it be really valid, reliable, and meaningful in this type of report. So we're taking a look just at the students who were receiving reading services and were provided this assessment by reading specialists who are highly skilled in administration of the assessment. You can see that there's a fall and a spring benchmark. So side by side, in the fall, 84% of the students receiving reading services in the district, not by any one specific grade level. We had 84% of them, scoring in that below range, so they were below grade level. But by spring, that number was reduced to 49%. And you can see the same side by side for the on grade level and the above grade level. So by the end of the year, the students receiving services, we had 23% of those students receiving services now scoring above grade level, which is great. We want to see more of that. We can take a look at the Boutwell and the Wildwood. Again, at the beginning of the year, you know, all of these kiddos who are identified to receive support were falling in that below grade level category. And by the end of the year, we had taken that 100% of students receiving services all below grade level. And by the end of the year, at the Boutwell, 33% of them were actually scoring above kindergarten grade level, and 8% at the Wildwood. Then you can take a look at the Shawsheen, and again, the biggest comparison really would be all of the students that are receiving services are falling below the grade level. But by the end of the year, you can see that 9% were scoring above. So that's a big, big transition for those 9% to go from way, you know, scoring below grade level to being above grade level by the end of the year. So you can take a look here at the Woburn Street. Again, first grade, second grade, third grade. The transition you can see from 100% at each grade at the beginning of the year benchmark to how we are by the third and final benchmark of the year. 52% scoring above grade level at the end of first grade, 67% at the end of second grade. We didn't quite move enough students at the third grade level. So that's something for us to take a look at and focus on with that data. We take a look at the North Intermediate, and again, for fourth grade and our fifth grade, moving students to at least on grade level. Again, we aren't moving too many to above grade level, but we can take a look at that as well. And the West Intermediate, fourth grade, by the end of the year, 23% of the students receiving services were scoring above grade level, and in the fifth grade, 6%. So what do we do with all of this data? We have already talked about how many of our district and school improvement goals are data-driven, and this is some of the data that we're looking at as we inform our decision-making and setting goals. We also are looking to have educator goals at the individual educator level, and school goals and district goals aligned, so that we're all working at some level to target the same goal. We're going to continue, as we have over recent years, ongoing in-depth examination of the MCAS data as well as the other district assessment data. There are structures in place to support that work. We have teams that are building-based that take a look at the data tied to the goals for that particular school. We've got support through our new literacy coach at the elementary level, working with teachers and reading specialists around the data to increase those gains. We have professional development to support improvement goals, and that will be outlined when we present the district professional development plan. And we're going to continue with our instructional rounds and our curriculum walks. The literacy coach, the math coach at the middle school, and our elementary math specialist will conduct learning walks with administrators and other educators to see good instruction in the classroom so that they can talk about the strategies and practices they see being implemented in those classrooms. And we are going to do more co-planning and coaching, thanks to the new positions of a literacy coach at the elementary level and a math coach at the middle school level, in addition to the coaching that's already been happening through Lisa Ippolito in her role as the elementary math specialist. And for parents who would want to have more information on student growth percentile, there is information on our district website.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Oh, Mrs. Catherine?
I just have to comment, it's still alarming, but the thing is I don't know how much weight to put into the MCAS scores themselves
Yep.
and the assessment itself, but the numbers still, as Dr. Burnham did report, are significant with the high needs group, that it's still not it's still a serious situation, regardless as to the weight of the accuracy of what the assessment generates. I just want to say, it's just alarming, but it's not just our district, it's across the state. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done and a lot of collaboration. I think some of the groups that you participate in, especially that superintendent piece, maybe that might be something in the future that might come down with closing the gap in general within the Commonwealth. So, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Any other? I have some questions. Now that we've had a number of test cycles, have we ever gone back to the kids who say, you took it in the 3rd grade, now you're in the 4th grade, and now I'm going to match and see if you have improved personally? Have we done any of that?
Yeah, that's ongoing at the individual class level. The schools are looking at data like that. Our elementary math specialist is looking at data with teachers, particularly to address concerns around interventions. What types of interventions would be appropriate for these individual students, given their struggles, as we can identify them either at the standard level or just, to your point, historically, things that are problematic. Last year, the special education vertical team took a deep look at standards in math, looked at it all year long to try to analyze what the misconceptions are for the students. What is it about the choices that they make, the wrong choices that they make for their answer choices? What is it that's leading them that way? How are they thinking if that's the choice that they're making? If we can understand how they're thinking and how they get to that choice, we can then address the misconception and reteach in a way that they won't make that mistake. But we need to identify what those patterns are, not only in general across a grade level, but for individual students. That's where the real meaning comes in, knowing the individual students.
One of the things, I know my granddaughter's last year's 3rd grade teacher had a sparkle list of words, and they were the words that reappear on the MCAS. So I'm wondering if we do that in all our classrooms, that all the grade levels have figured out which words are constantly there, and make sure that the kids understand those words, because in talking sometimes to the kids, you find out that they didn't know the words, they didn't know what they were looking for to be able to put an answer. So I think that would be one easy way it might help boost some of the scores. But to have the list of the words that reappear, make sure they understand what they mean.
Right.
So
And-
that's one thing. Another thing, in the math, are all the classes doing 2 hours of math in the elementary level?
2 hours at every grade level, I cannot say that that is the case.
Because that's the case in some classes, and that is a lot of math in one day. And what that means is your ELL, you don't have time to do all of your ELL or your science. I think that a lot of times, social studies and science are let go because you have to get these other things done and in. And that is a long time on one subject, and if your child is not really, it's not the best subject for that child, life is not happy in
Very
that.
true.
So I don't know why we went to 2 hours. It seems to me to be a really long period of time.
I'll look into the different grade levels that might be 2 hours. I think part of that 2-hour block that you're talking about, I suspect, is win time tacked on. We've talked about the win time before. That's that what I need time. That's the intervention time.
Oh, okay.
And I suspect that part of that 2-hour block is actually probably includes the 20 minutes of win time, which for some students might be spent on math.
Because you know, one of the things, remember when we first had the STE test results, and we did really well? So did we figure out what happened after that? Because it seems to me, I thought when we got the report, we were really quite up there, and we couldn't believe it because we hadn't had the science technology before. And yet now it seems to have really gone down, so I'm not sure how you figured that out.
I think it comes down to a focus on the standards. When there are clear patterns in the standards that we know that students are struggling with, that really comes down to a curriculum issue, where we need to make sure that the lessons that we are providing address the standards. So that's clearly a piece that needs to be worked on. And this year, with lead teachers at each of the grade spans, that's an area that can be focused on during common time in that department.
I also think on open-ended questions, I'm sorry, I have so many, this brought me back to my teaching days. On open-ended questions, when they first came out years ago when I was still teaching, people they thought, that's English. You're supposed to do that because you're the English teacher. But we used to always say, no, in science, you should be having some of these questions with every unit. And in social studies, you should be having some of these questions. Because when you look at the SATs, at this time it was more focused towards SATs, those paragraphs that they had to work with were science and they were social studies for the most part. They didn't have English questions on there. And so I really think that if we encourage those particular sets of teachers to add that, if it's not already there, but I'm thinking it's probably not already there, because it's not something that teachers normally do. But I think that might be helpful.
There has been a shift over the last couple of years, looking at the open response data in particular,
Right.
where all of the content teachers have been made aware of how the kids are responding in open response. And I believe that it has become a greater focus. We're not seeing the success that we would like to see in terms of the overall increase in the performance there, but we are working on it.
One thing I just wanted to add for science is that, not that, we want to necessarily cater to sort of the lowest common denominator, but in general, the results for science across the state were down.
Yeah.
So we've all districts in this holding pattern. We've been talking about next generation science standards now for 3 or 4 years. And it's only this year now, finally, where they're going to be put out for public comment in October and November with an estimated date of actually adopting them as the basis for the new STE curriculum frameworks in Massachusetts. So, a lot of districts, and I think Wilmington has taken a lead in this with the inter-district work. Let's just start to align, because we know that's going to be the basis, so let's just do it. Let's not wait for the state. And so that work has begun. But again, when you're in these holding patterns waiting and you have very old, standards in place, and yet the test is starting to evolve, I think when you see the entire state scores tanking, for lack of a better term, it's an indication of a larger problem that we'd like to be on the forefront of, but it's not just Wilmington, I think, that struggles with this issue.
Yes. Mrs. Burns?
So, because it's been several years in the making, and the standards have changed, and is there a science curriculum out there, or are the teachers having to create the curriculum for the standards? Is that where we maybe have lost ground this year?
No, we're actually gained ground this year, and it doesn't show that in the test results. But we, in partnership with 14 other districts, have started to do the work to map the new standards. We are part of the largest group in the state doing this work, and we have actually been recognized by the state for taking a lead in this work. And we were lucky enough to receive some grant funding through the Department of Ed to do the work this summer. We had a 5-day institute for this science mapping project, and Wilmington was the host. And we're excited about the work. The work is going to continue through this school year, and the plan is to have another week-long institute, bringing the teachers together again to continue the work. So we're going to have high-level maps laid out, but we're also going to get down to the work of developing detailed units that all of the districts can take.
Okay, so none of it exists in some.
Right,
Okay.
we're just
I just wanted
breaking
to,
ground on this work, but we are really ahead of
the game,
most districts across the state in tackling this work,
very good.
which is really great for us.
It'd be nice to see standards released with curriculum or something similar.
Well, I mean, that's an excellent point. It's a process, right? So first you wait for standards, or you take the lead in saying, these are gonna be the standards, let's do the work. You develop the maps, you develop the units, and then you have to find the materials and the resources to support that. So it is a process, and so it doesn't happen overnight, and we're in the beginning stages of doing that as a result of kind of the delay. But, you know, we're definitely ahead of the game, I believe.
It's tough to assess something when you're still in that development
Right.
phase and to
Absolutely.
get a true reading. Thank you very much.
I just have a couple more things. One of the things is, do we teach strategies for test taking? You know how in SAT courses you teach strategies? Do we teach the kids about finding the keywords, how to decode what's in their question, the outlining? Are we doing that in all of the classrooms? Like, how do they hit, when they're in the 3rd grade and they have this paragraph in front of them that they aren't used to seeing, do we show them how you go over that paragraph and look for what you need to know in order to answer the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the strategies that teachers began to use last year was the writing with colors, where they could identify key features in a passage. So that's one strategy that we started working with, but that's one strategy.
Right.
Teachers have been embedding strategies and techniques within the context of their daily teaching to establish those habits of mind and habits of practice, so that when students take a test, they're not getting caught up because they're not familiar
Right.
with how to approach something. For instance, 3rd grade, the assessment is in one book. So the questions are in the book, and the answers go in that same book. Whereas 4th grade, now they've got, for the first time, 2 books. There's a book that has the questions, and there's a book where you put your answers. When students respond in writing, they have a box, and all the words for the response have to go in the box. They will not score anything that is written outside of the box. So there are strategies like this that teachers know.
Call that out-of-the-box thinking.
Yes, we don't get any points for that, not on MCAS anyway. Teachers use those types of elements in their daily work. They might give a writing prompt, and they might give a worksheet or a handout where there's the box, where the kids have to get their written response in the box, so that they're familiar with the fact that that's how it's going to be on their test. They might give them some assessments where they have to bubble in the answer on a different sheet of paper during an assessment that they might give in class. So that they're kind of building those skills so that those nuances of test taking won't be the downfall.
I like the way that it's integrated. It's not like, okay, today we're gonna teach, test-taking skills. It's integrated in there, and so there might be a reminder by a teacher, remember, if this happens and, when you're taking an exam, remember this is a cue. Or if they're using a graphic organizer, they'll say, you're not gonna have this, but you can draw this yourself to help you organize your thoughts, for example. So they're teaching it, but not in a way that's like, okay, now we're doing test-taking 101. So.
I was in an AP Calculus class today, and there was that reminder, a test-taking tip. Remember, round to 3 numbers. That's the expectation in your AP exam. You're going to have to round to 3 numbers. So it starts early, those strategies, at all levels for all kinds of assessments. So,
I know everybody's working so hard in the school system to do this. It's just discouraging in one sense that we keep putting so much effort into this and we're remaining the same. And I don't know what other communities are doing that gets them to go beyond that little hump and be able to move up. And so I know we're all in the same boat trying to figure that out. And for the teachers too, they must be working so hard, and then that's discouraging. You probably go, oh my God, Sally did, why, you know that, Sally, I know you knew that, why'd you put that answer? I think, I hope that they kind of are able, well, but you can't because those kids have moved on. They're not in your class anymore, so I think that's one of the biggest things that bothers me about this testing, is that you don't have the ability, they should get the answers back later in the year so that they can go over them with the kids.
and that's the importance of using our in-district assessments,
Mhm.
because we have control over the turnaround for the data, and we get information in real time, or as close to real time as we can get, to inform what we're doing for the students that we have in front of us right now. And we're looking to identify patterns so that we can take a side-by-side comparison of our internal assessments and the outcomes of the state assessments to see if they're predictive of how students are going to perform on the state assessments. Can we see patterns? This is how the kids performed on our internal assessments, and this is the outcome that we see with kids that are falling in these categories on our benchmarks. It's predictive of how they're going to perform with the state assessment. That way, again, it's sort of that, taking a temperature along the way and figuring out what can be done in real time now to remediate whatever that learning gap is, so that we won't see that as an outcome when we have the state test. And the better our own assessments are over time as we're tightening them up and they're becoming more reliable, they'll be more impactful in that outcome on the state assessment.
And I think we can't emphasize enough how it's a very complicated, kids are complicated as learners, and it's more than just about academics. And I think that's what we're figuring out, that perhaps some districts have figured out. It's complicated. So when we talk about tiered systems of support, that's an important component, not just supporting the academic, but the non-academic. And when we talk about, this district has only recently, relatively, implemented the practice of intervention time, win time, and so I think we figured out how to put it into the schedule, and now we can just work on, and that was complicated, but now we can figure out how to deliver more meaningful interventions. We're using our assessments to be able to group students better, to know who is at what tier and what services to provide those students. We're looking to provide the resources that we didn't necessarily have before. On the academic side, the non-academic, that's all very new to us, the focus on behavioral health and how we're supporting students. And we have some challenges that other districts don't have. We have the challenge of a lot of transitions, a lot of grade level transitions that other districts don't have. So, it's very different going from, pre-KK, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 versus pre-K to 5. So it's like I said, it's complicated, and so we're looking at all those issues, and we can't solve them all, in a year, but we certainly have plans and thoughts in place for how we're going to, set the stage for us to see higher growth and stronger achievement in the district.
And the one other thing I'd just like to put forward is that I'm worried, I had talked to the superintendent about this too, that we never have a budget that says we're going to buy new textbooks for the secondary level. And I'm worried in the middle school that some of those textbooks are so outdated, like 15 years old. Now that I'm seeing textbooks coming home, we're up to 7th grade now. I learn new things as we go through the grades, the systems. I'm just concerned that if they each have enough textbooks, if they're over 10 years old, I think we need to start replacing if that's the case. And so I'd really like us to look into the textbooks at the middle school and what people are using and if they have enough of them and what their dates are on those textbooks. And I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I just feel that if we need to get more textbooks there, we need to let something else go for a year. We've been really good at keeping up as a school committee on the elementary books and the elementary programs. But for high school and middle school, we haven't per se looked at any of those. So I'm just hoping that we could add that to the mix a little bit.
And I would just point out that currently, we're just now seeing publishers coming out with some quality products that have been rewritten for Common Core for the secondary level, 6 through 8 particularly,
Right.
in math. So we will be looking at those. So we're
Hallelujah.
finally getting some quality to look at. It doesn't make any sense for us to update,
Right.
to
I know.
purchase newer materials if they really aren't aligned with the new standards. So we've been waiting to have high-quality materials that we can look at. So that's happening for math.
Excellent.
We've got the same sort of thing happening with ELA. I would say that we're definitely, we need to be looking at science, but we've been in a holding pattern, and there's a lag time typically. You see, we're just now getting to the point where publishers have high-quality materials for the Common Core, ELA, and math. We're gonna see a lag time on the science as well. And I would say that in social studies, we've been taking a look through the curriculum renewal cycle at the possibility of making some shifts with how we approach delivery of the standards. You might recall, we talked about, we're examining the model of teaching history in a global context. So US history doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in the context of world history. So everything's connected. So rather than teaching events and whatnot in isolation, just what was going on in the United States, what other factors were driving some of that because of what was going on globally? So that is a shift that you're starting to see, that we're looking at, but we're not the only ones looking at that. What's that going to do for textbooks? And, we can get into a whole discussion on our textbooks the way to go with, technology advancing the way it is. It's not that we're not looking at it, but we're in flux right now with shifts in standards, and,
It's good for us to get this update, though,
Yeah.
so we appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Can we
Mrs.
get
Grosh?
access to your presentation that you just?
sure,
Okay.
we can put it on the website.
Mr. Mullis?
I have a question. I'm curious about something. I noticed on the students in the warning level, in ELA, science, and math were similar in certain grades. Do we know if they're the same students that are struggling in all three subjects, or is it a random number? Is there any way to know that?
Our teachers will end up looking at their student data. So they will get down to an item analysis level, question by question, for each of the students that they've got. So they will know, as they look at their class roster, how students fared on each of the tests this past spring. So again, they'll be looking at the students in their classes and the data from last spring, so that they can see where their struggles are and how they might be able to address some of those learning gaps based on a standards analysis and an item analysis, question by question. But that work is happening in the context of individual classroom. Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages, if we're able to get a tool, a data analysis tool, it's challenging for teachers to drill down to that level, but if you had a data analysis tool that you were quickly able to say, okay, show me all the students in my class who scored warning or needs improvement in math, science, and ELA, and it quickly says, here they are, then, you see that right away versus the amount of effort that has to go into drilling down into that data. So that's the advantage of investing in a resource like that. And then, of course, there's still that opportunity to drill down and say, okay, now that I know it's these students, where there are specific areas, what specific standards they struggled on, and then dive in and try to figure out how to adjust your instruction and what you need to focus on. But the first level of that sort, if you will, that filter is, show me the most struggling learners of all the learners in our school. And we can find that out now. It's just a much more time-intensive process to do that.
Thank you.
You all set? Thank you very much. That was really an in-depth report. Excellent, thank you.
And I think, just to add to that, I think what's kind of great about the way we've got this structured is this report was focused on sort of the academic. And at the next meeting, when we see the YRBS data, we're going to be seeing some of the non-academic performance, if you will, which I think it's important for us to show both, too, so that you see how our students are performing in both areas.
Excellent, great, thank you very much. Okay, all right, our next item is the MASC delegate to the annual convention. And on Wednesday, November 4th, the delegates to the MASC annual meeting will vote on resolutions. And so tonight, we're going to choose our delegate, and we had a volunteer. We still have a volunteer. So Mrs. Bonish has volunteered to do that and be there on Wednesday afternoon for that. And those of us who are there will certainly be there right there to support you too. So we'll have learned how to, by the time we're done, we'll have everybody learn how to do this. So that'll be good. So I'd taken a motion to appoint the school committee member Ginny Bonish as a delegate for the 2015 annual business meeting. Do we have a motion? Kathleen? Thank you. Second, Mr. Mullis? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, Kim, thank you. Which brings us to the resolutions. Since we had these and we had a chance to look through them, I'm only going to read the little part, therefore be it resolved, so that we can go through these fairly quickly. The first one is a resolution regarding high school starting times, which is interesting because we had already started talking about this a little bit, so. And it says, after giving us the reasons why the Newton School Committee decided to put this before the body, therefore, be it resolved that MASC be authorized to petition the legislature and to support legislation, including S254, which calls for the establishment of a special commission to study the appropriate starting time for students in middle and high school. So if we all agree with that, I think we can just vote on this once at the end. Yeah, we all. Does anybody have any objection to that?
Well, I guess if they're just voting to create a group to discuss that?
Yeah, yeah,
To study.
I think that's
Just a
reasonable,
study.
personally.
yeah, okay. Resolution 2, Poverty in Children, submitted by the Framingham School Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mass Association of School Committees will prioritize as a matter of its public policy agenda and file for and support legislation that will support the eradication of poverty among children in Massachusetts and advocate for social and economic justice for students and their families that will include, and it has about 10 items here, based on the support of a revenue stream, support for state programs, advocacy for nutrition programs, et cetera. So, and the rationale on this one is, the resolution would help ensure that our underserved population of school children will be provided with the supports and services necessary for lasting success in the classroom and in their future. It goes on a little bit, basically it says the same thing. Yes.
I think this came up in last year's delegate meeting. It's nice to see that Framingham has expanded it a little bit, where last year's pretty much dealt with free pre-K services for children, which I think we all could agree to, but
Right.
I would suggest maybe adding an amendment to it to encapsulate, I don't know what kind of verbiage, but to encapsulate full-day public, at free kindergarten incorporated into this. But that would be my suggestion, to add full-day, public kindergarten. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, but what I'm not sure about is, this is about poverty and the
Right,
children,
but-
and I'm not sure how that would
Because I think,
dovetail into this one.
because they're talking about support for pre-care programs for all children, but I think some of the conversation that came up with, which it was, everyone could see the support and couldn't disagree with the funding piece for pre-K kindergarten programs for all children, but I think in the state where kindergarten is not full day and it's not free to all, some people pay for full-day kindergarten in other districts. I think that was a source of concern at the meeting last year, that until kindergarten became, free, full-day programs throughout the Commonwealth, I think that was a concern of many people before looking at the pre-K programs, which I think I think they intended to have it publicly funded.
I wonder why they didn't include that in here, though. Does anyone else have a reaction to this? I don't know, Jenny, what do you think? You know what I think? Let's hold that one aside
Okay.
for now, because we have next time too. So we might want to look at that or we might want to call MASC and ask about, how you do it and how you'd word it if we did that.
It would be something I think everyone should crunch on and decide whether,
Yeah.
other districts may have already considered it as well.
Right.
I know Division I has it.
So let's
written.
we'll hold that one out for now. Put a star there, okay. Resolution 3, these are all from Framingham School Committee, interestingly enough. Resolution 3, tying test scores to Chapter 70 funding. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC support legislation to ensure that individual student MCAS and/or PARCC assessment data in the given academic year is ascribed to the school and district that claims Massachusetts Chapter 70 funding based on that student's October 1st enrollment, provided that the student is enrolled in a Massachusetts school when the tests are administered. The rationale is if a school accepts Massachusetts Chapter 70 funding for a student in a given academic year, that school should be responsible for the MCAS and/or PARCC results of that student in the academic year. This must be around kids that come and go out of school systems,
The
which
notion that
fortunately we don't have.
sometimes would counsel students out of a particular school.
Yes, so they don't take the
I
test,
think it's charter-driven as well.
yeah. So do we have any thoughts about this one,
I'm for it.
for it?
Well, if charter schools are going to draw from Chapter 70 money, then they should also
Right.
be expected to do the state assessment because it's public money.
Exactly, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll hold that one. Resolution 4, support for an equitable and sustainable placement program for students covered under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Act. And down at the bottom it says, therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees file for and support legislation that will design, implement, and fund a program that will provide a more sustainable and equitable placement program for the state's homeless and McKinney-Vento students. A placement program needs to include consideration of the social, emotional, and behavioral circumstances of the student, timing of the placement in relation to budgetary considerations, proximity to the student's previously established support system, and the availability of resources the receiving district has to accommodate the student's needs. So it's talking about, in fact, the superintendent, we were discussing at one point that the homeless children could be far away, and we're bringing them into our school system, and then they go back far away with a lot of time in the car and things. So I'm thinking, they're trying to make it easier, it looks like. Because they're placed, it says the families are placed in housing based on availability of affordable temporary housing. So the closest available housing could be way down the other side of the state for us.
Yeah, I think the goal here is that there be more resources to support districts so that if a student, you know, this perhaps where they go to school is perhaps the one stability factor they have in their entire life. And so if they get placed through transitional assistance, you know, 1 week they're in Lowell and next week they're in New Bedford, and then that's a little bit of, it's not really what happens, but month to month, if they move around that much through the system in terms of housing, and we don't have the resource, that we don't get the resources from the state to help with those expenses, the law is written such a way as that as a student transitions, say, from 5th grade to 6th grade, we could, we don't have to assume responsibility for that student, and then we've taken away that stability. So I think, you know, to provide for more resources and, you know, accountability structures to allow that stability factor to remain in place is in the best interest of the student. So if they get bounced around in the system, if you will, we are appropriately resourced to be able to support those students.
So it sounds like a positive, okay. So we'll vote for that one again, and, all right, that's the same one, okay. That one goes way over than I did. Number 5, tax reform ballot question. Oh, I think. Therefore, be it resolved that the MASC explore ways to promote social and economic equity through a ballot initiative whose purpose may include a state constitutional amendment, tax reform, protection of the state's neediest residents of all ages, and seeks additional revenue only from tax reform affecting the state's wealthiest residents. Further, that the goal of such a ballot referendum would be to secure a stronger financial base to underwrite needed improvements in the infrastructure of the Commonwealth, as well as the educational, social, and economic well-being of its residents. I know that the MTA is working on a law. They're trying to get a law.
It's actually, would be a change to the Constitution, a constitutional amendment that would levy an additional tax amount, I think it's 4%, on incomes, net incomes, over $1 million in the Commonwealth. This would be a state issue, and the process by which one gets an amendment to a constitution adopted is somewhat lengthy. It has to go through 2 different years. So if it was on the ballot in 2016, it would also have to pass the ballot in 2018 to get passed. So I assume that MASC is looking for the support of its members to jump onto that effort or something that might spin off of that effort. And the way the language is currently written is that extra tax revenue would go specifically to education and infrastructure improvements in the Commonwealth.
To me, that one's very clear, and they keep sending updates on how they're doing it. But to me, this one is not as clear. It looks like it's putting everything into the pot. I don't know, just,
Yeah, I presume that perhaps they're assuming that if that effort is not successful and/or there are spin-off efforts, that they have sort of blessing of the membership to pursue spin-off
We
type.
don't necessarily have to take a position on it, just because they're voting on it, doesn't mean that we necessarily have to, just to let you know that,
Right,
that's an
right,
option if the
yes,
board doesn't,
yeah.
I mean, after the board decides not to take a
Right.
position, that's another option to consider.
Yeah. So what do we think?
I agree with you, it's a little too general, because it doesn't even, it says needed improvements in the infrastructure of the Commonwealth. It's not specific to education.
Yeah, that's a good point. So do you think, how many people think we should say no on this one?
Not take a position. I'd rather
Okay, how
not just
many
take a
people think we
position.
should not take a position? 3, wait a minute, 1, 2. You voted twice.
Has 2 hands.
I didn't know if you noticed that, Kathleen.
Take a position, don't take a position.
Which do you want, no or not take a position? No. Okay, so it's so no wins.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll say no to that one. Now, remember, we are the person who's our delegate. If you hear information that changes your mind, you're able to change the vote. That's how we send you, like, wide open, actually. What can we say? Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
The next thing, resolution, and then we'll be right there showing you that we're not happy. Resolution 6, membership of a school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC submit to the general court proposed legislation that MGL Chapter 15, Section 1E be revised. And so it will be revised down here. And, oh, it goes on and on and on. And the representative from the school committee from a list of 3 nominees provided by the MASC and 5 additional members.
I see yes.
What?
I say yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What do we think? We all think yes? Yes, okay, that's a yes. And Resolution 7, relative, last one, to the teaching strategies gold assessments for kindergarten students. Didn't we see this already tonight? All right. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC urge the Department of Early Education and Care and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to end the mandate that districts implement TS Gold or any other externally developed kindergarten assessment. I think we should ask for your opinion.
Yeah, I would just add, well, you will get screams of joy from our early childhood students. You support this. The issue is that this past year, there were actually 10 right domains that MKEA is supposed to assess, and as a transitional measure, this year, we only had to assess 2 of the 10, the cognitive and social emotional, as Dr. Burnham noted. The plan was, and they did give us the opportunity this year to apply for a waiver such that we would only have to continue, right, to do those 2 domains. But the plan would have been, if this were to continue as a mandate, that eventually they'd have to do all 10 domains. And the reality is that we have some very strong assessments in those other 8 domains that we already use that we think are as good as what is in MKEA. The flip side, the other piece of this is that if the kindergarten grant goes away, as we believe it will, maybe not all at once next year, but is phased out over the next 2 years, then clearly their leverage is gone, because that's what they're doing now. The hook is you get a grant, you have to do this. So if you could just take that off the table, like I said, there would be shouts of joy from our.
Mrs. Colonel.
One additional piece of information is that this is tied to the funding, but the funding actually comes from the federal level. So this is strings attached, if you will, that the state has to comply and have an assessment to comply at the federal level.
So you agree that it would not be, it would be good to say, we don't want to do this? We
It
would
wouldn't make
go
a
along with
difference,
this.
right? It wouldn't make a difference if it's federally tied, then
Right.
this, so they could put it before the delegation, but whether or not MASC supports it or not,
Right.
it's not gonna make a difference because it's federally driven, not state driven. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think the only flexibility they have would be to identify a different assessment
Oh.
that would be used for the state. So if the
So
issue
you're not
is
getting rid of
is
an assessment?
specifically
You're just changing the
teaching
assessment
strategies
within?
gold, then that's one thing. If it's an assessment altogether, then
Okay,
that might be a different story.
I see.
Do you send the results into the state? Oh, you do, okay.
Yep, twice a year.
So it's not getting rid of the assessment, it's just getting rid of that type of assessment is
Right.
what they're.
So what do we feel this will be?
Okay, so
I say yes.
what would then come into its place if, let's say, I mean, this is just so MASC can advocate towards that piece, but where would that alternative assessment, if they hypothetically could get it through, which I don't think they could but at this game, I mean, what were they gonna?
No, and to the superintendent's point, it may become a moot point pretty quickly
Right, right.
if the funds aren't available.
I think I think if you support this, what you're saying essentially is, no unfunded mandates. And this is an
Yeah.
unfunded mandate. So no matter what it looks like, if it comes in the form of, you will do this assessment or whatever, it doesn't come with I mean, yes, you could say it's funded because it's attached to the grant, but it really, the grant resources that we get go to fund the educational assistants that are in the program. It doesn't go to administering this
The
assessment.
Right.
All right, okay. So let's have a vote. How many say yes? I may say, what was the other question? No. And then there was a third one? Take no position. Okay. So the yeses have it, so it'll be yes. Thank you. All right, and so we'll look into this poverty in children for the next meeting. Put that under old business. That'll be good. Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments? Folks behind me, so we can't see them.
Nobody's here.
Nobody's here, okay. Other reports,
I have one.
okay.
The School Wellness Council met a couple weeks ago, and the committee adopted a mission statement. It is the mission of the Wilmington School Wellness Advisory Council to educate, promote, and support health and wellness to enhance lifelong healthy behaviors. Essential School Health Services Grant, Year 8 of awarded from the Mass Department of Public Health. During Crow is mentoring Burlington and Woburn Public Schools.
Wow.
The school nurses will be doing a continuous quality improvement project of the student attendance. We go on. School-wide flu clinic is tomorrow, October 8th, 2:30 to 4 at the Wilmington Middle School. And then phys ed and health working on multiple DDMS, Woburn Street School, that's it, working on the DDMSs. And then the Woburn Street School Wellness Team will be going to the DESE Wellness for the student success.
Nice.
Yep,
Okay.
so they went over a lot, went over the lunches.
Wow.
The kids let us know what they like better and what they don't, so.
Did the wheat pancakes, the wheat pizza go out the window?
Not yet. We wish. And that's it.
Good, thank you. Mrs. Broussard?
I have one for WEF, and there's 2 dates that I want to let people know about. This coming Tuesday, October 13th at 7 o'clock is the grant recipient night, and that's the presentations from the teachers and staff that received the Explorer grants, and they were awarded to them in the spring. Most of them took benefit of it over the summer, so Tuesday night is when we'll hear what they did with their money, and it's usually a pretty fun night. That's at 7 o'clock at the middle school library. And then the annual Walk for WEF will take place on Thursday, October 29th, and this is for our youngest students through 5th grade. And that's all I got on that.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Just a date coming up, November 17th, I believe, the Board of Education is going to discuss the Park versus MCAS saga. I think I've seen updated information that the results of Park should be coming out at the beginning, right before, early November. I think November 4th, I think it's what it was slated. So that is going to be there's a lot of talk on the listserver, MASC listserver about that. But I think no one can speculate what's going to happen. But I just thought that I'd keep you guys aware because it's kind of going to be a shock regardless as to what transpires from that conversation.
You're absolutely right.
And that may be
Anything
something
else?
too, if you'd like to collaborate with regards to the bill that you spoke to about earlier, because I'd love to collaborate with you on that. And maybe if we can get it in before conference or even after conference, right before the vote, to talk to the state legislatures about it as well, this discussion.
Okay, correspondence? We have some.
Okay, we have received a letter from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And it's addressed specifically to Ms. Peters at our high school, but copied to all of us. The Committee on Public Secondary Schools at its June 14th, 2015 meeting voted to accept the 5-year progress report of Wilmington High School and to continue the school's accreditation. So that's good news. And in particular, the committee was pleased to learn of the following: the completion of the new facility and upgrading of technology, the implementation of interdisciplinary instructional pods, the completion of the summative assessments by subject discipline and collaborative work to utilize data to inform instruction, the increase in professional learning opportunities for teachers that addresses active learning for students, the support for the placement of special education students in general education classes for the purpose of inclusion and raising their social, academic, and civic expectations, and finally, the increase in higher education partnerships through Middlesex Community College. So that's all good.
Wow, that's very nice. Thank you. Okay. Let me see. Then we have our future meeting dates and agenda items. And that would be October 21st will be our next October meeting. We don't have it down here, but October 28th, we're hoping to, hope that everybody can make it to attend the, do we know, Mrs. Burns, what time that's? 7 o'clock. And is it in Villanova Hall, did you say? Okay, 7:30 in Villanova Hall.
7 o'clock.
I mean, I'm sorry,
Yeah, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
7 to 8:30, I believe it's scheduled.
Oh, 7 to 8:30, okay, good. And then our November meeting will be November 18th. Okay, and, all right, we all set. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Burns?
So moved?
Second? Mrs. Carroll? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Kim.